Hey, it's Chris Herbert, and welcome to my Monday morning podcast for April the 7th, 2025. Last week was an interesting week, certainly ups and downs. Uh, I, I'm amazed at how many of us um, don't become aware of whether we have um, a healthy blood pressure level or not. And I'm 61, and I guess being more conscious of my health vitals is obviously more front and center because I want to continue to live an active life until I joke around with my kids, until I'm 200, um, which means, I've got 140 years left, which is awesome. Um, but I had a scare about a year and a half ago where my doctor, through a physical, identified that I had an elevated blood pressure issue. So I've been having to manage that and track it since then. And the good news from last week is I went to see my doctor, and I got the news that my lab results were good and that my blood pressure was 140 over 83. The perfect level is 120 over 80. If you start going above 150, I think it becomes a bit problematic on the top side of your blood pressure, and then I think about 100 in the bottom part of your blood pressure. I can't remember which is systolic, dystolic, all this sort of stuff. I just know that that's a metric that people should use. The other thing, I don't know how often we go out and get our physicals with our doctors. This should be an annual thing. But how many of us actually go and get a physical? And just to make sure that, our eating habits, our exercise habits, or active living habits, if we have them, if we don't have them, whether they're affecting our vitals. So the good news is, saw the doctor. I had to travel to Oakville because we don't have a doctor here in Grey Bruce. Bit of a challenge in Ontario is the lack of doctors pretty much anywhere, but in rural Ontario it is an issue with many families not having doctors, so they have to go to the ER even if their kid has a cold or something like that, which is very problematic and still a problem that hasn't been solved here by our government, and I guess our populace at large. So, when a new doctor arrives in Grey Bruce, his or her roster fills up real fast. And now I've made a conscious decision not to sign up or try to sign up for a local doctor because I can't afford the time to drive to Oakville, which is about a 2.5 hour drive, to see my doctor, because I feel that the spots that are available for people here with new doctors should be for those families that have kids who can't take a day off to go to a doctor somewhere else where they're already rostered. The other thing that's interesting about our healthcare system here in Ontario is if I got off of my doctor's roster in Oakville, I wouldn't be able to book an appointment, and I essentially wouldn't have a doctor, and I'd sort of have to rely on going to a clinic and waiting, and that's fine, or going to an ER. But I choose to stay on her roster because in order for me to get on a roster here in rural Ontario, I have to first give up my spot for my doctor in Oakville and then hope that I get a doctor up here in Grey Bruce. So for the foreseeable future, for various reasons, including the most important one, which is I can spare the time to go see my doctor in Oakville and not take up a space that a family would need who can't afford to take off time and go see a doctor somewhere else if they're on a roster. So I don't want to take up that space. So the good news is that. The other thing is I was able to go see my grandkids and spend some time with them. And because my business is a marketing agency and a venture development, entrepreneurship and development agency, I pretty much can. My office is, 2 monitors. Although I do like having a space, and I have space at PowerLink in Port Elgin, and then I have an office in Halton region with one of my good friends at his office in Halton. So we've got physical space when we need it. Anyway, so sad news this week was my youngest daughter works at a I wouldn't call it a homeless shelter, but it's basically a support program that has a physical space in Grey County. And she had encountered a gentleman who was very down, unfortunately addicted to fentanyl, who was contemplating taking his life, and she took him off the ledge. This was maybe a week or two ago, and he sobered up and came back and saw her and gave her a hug and thanked her for, in his words, saving his life. And he gave her a memento as appreciation of her caring about his well-being. But unfortunately, he passed away a week ago, less than a week ago, overdosed on fentanyl. It's very hard on my daughter, but hard on, obviously, this gentleman's immediate friends and family too. So I was really encouraged to see Pierre Poilievre's recent announcement about addressing the addiction issue, especially around fentanyl and opioids in general. And like I've said numerous times on Twitter, my political stripes are blue, red, orange, and green. So I will vote based on what I think is the most important things that need to be voted on, and the party and the leaders that I think are best suited to address the current things that need to be worked on. So I don't yet know which way I'm going to vote, but this leads me to the idea that, who gives a shit as to what party you vote for, and why does party loyalty blind people from looking at what the other parties are saying and doing, and the other leaders are proposing, and the other people that vote for other parties? Like, how is it that you sort of write them off or cancel them, and dismiss and be totally dismissive? We can't afford to do that in today's day and age. Party stripes matter less to me, and they should matter less to other people. So as an example, there are people being fired in the US because of the various things that Doge is doing. Some of them are huge fans of Trump, or were huge fans of Trump and the Republican Party, and they're facing serious problems going forwards, whether they're farmers or government employees. And you don't want to wish that on anybody, regardless of your political stripe. So if you wag your finger at people like that, saying, "I told you so, you shouldn't have voted," what does that accomplish? Nothing. So we really need to think about, not being dismissive about people because they vote differently. And even if they're vocal about, voting for the other team, we need to have dialogue with people who think differently, feel differently about things, and not really, be worried about repercussions and toxicity and that sort of thing. That's not easy. There's a lot of that going around. So right now, if there's a good policy offered by the Conservatives, the NDPs, the Green Party, the Bloc Québécois, the Liberals, I'm advocating it, I'm sharing it, because things are different now. in terms of where we need to go with our country. Things are different now in terms of where we need to go globally, in terms of, especially in democratic countries, where we have problems in terms of a middle class that is eroding in terms of their buying power, in terms of their ability to be self-sufficient. We have issues with youth, especially young men, who are, I think somebody, who's his name? He's a prof at New York City, or at the New York University. His name escapes me, but basically, there's research out there. There's two sources actually. I'm kind of a bit fuzzy about it, but there's research out there that says, men between the ages of 25 and 54, that there's a large proportion of men in that age category who have just checked out of getting a job. So they're not reported as unemployed. They've just checked out. And I don't know how many men are, young men are addicted to opioids. I think there's maybe more men addicted to opioids than women, and in both cases, we don't want to see that. So my point is that regardless of your political stripe, there are fundamental issues that we need to address, and where the government should focus on is, and community members like myself and others, entrepreneurs and just people who want to help those who are in greater need than us, which is a broader audience of people now. It's a wide range of people that are finding it difficult to get by economically, mentally. I could go on and on. That's a growing group of people. It's a growing demographic, for lack of a better word, is people that just can't get by, whether it's mentally, economically, socially. It's getting worse. So that's the fundamental platform of any government for the foreseeable future. So whether it's improving the average income for a household, whether it's improving the ability to afford a house, whether it's improving the ability to regulate your emotions and the mental challenges you're facing, without the need for addictions, which is really tough. I mean, let's face it, Ontario to some degree and Canada to some degree incentivize addiction. We've made marijuana legal. Gambling is an important part of raising taxes for Canada. People spend money hoping to win a lottery. These are problems. But I'm hopeful. We have to be hopeful. But I really believe that we need to take these matters into our own hands at the individual level and contribute to in any way we can. But really, things that are going to get worse in terms of just being able to live a fair life, a life where you don't have to have 3 jobs, where the business models out there that are successful, and the ventures and entrepreneurs that are being successful are actually thinking about the well-being of society, as opposed to the convenience, So I take a look at the gig economy as an example, where people have side hustles and second jobs through Uber and Amazon and other things where they have to augment their income. This is not something that I think is helpful. What we need is businesses, entrepreneurs, business models, programs that accelerate, um, you know, the what's the right word? That accelerate and make it possible for a family to be able to afford to live in such a way that they're not forced to make decisions between, you know, taking a second job or having both both partners having to work just to get by. You know, wouldn't it be nice if if a couple or even a single parent always had the choice and they think, okay, well, I've got one job. I only have to have one job, whether it's my own business or I work for somebody else. I'm making enough that I can afford to spend time with my children, or I can afford to spend time outside of working, to help my community, to volunteer, to explore other interests. So I don't know if it's all of a sudden us implementing a living wage, although isn't that what we should be striving for across the world? You know, is being able to make it so that all of us have choice. And economically, we're not sort of handcuffed to multiple jobs, and we're not having to make critical decisions between paying rent or feeding our kids, you know, and that sort of thing. So it's a problem, and I'm not probably going on too much about it, but it's something that persistently floats in my head all the time in terms of how do we create this really good goal of sustainability as individuals, you know, as businesses, and ecologically. So I'm a really big fan of the UN's sustainable development goals. There's 17 of them, and I've done quite a bit of research on it, and I've also worked with a college on assessing their curriculum against those SDG goals to see whether they're, they've integrated sustainability into their curriculum, and it's been fascinating. And I'm also really focused in on, and this will be forever, the balance of ecology and economics, especially when it comes to industries where, you know, they use land, they use resources, natural resources. So farming's a good example, forestry, fishing, hunting, those sort of things. And that falls under the NAICS sector code 11, I think. So you'll probably hear more about me talking about sustainability, but it's much in a broader term, because, you know, if you talk to a business owner, sustainability has to also be tied to the economics of their business, which is really an important factor. So that's why I always, when I'm talking to folks in the agroforestry industry, for example, you know, I'm probing in the areas of the economics of forest management and the ecology of forest management. When I'm talking with farmers, I'm learning about how they're balancing the ecology of the land, the quality of the soil, the minimum use of pesticides and herbicides, etc., and the economics of being able to produce enough revenue, enough gross margin, enough profit so they can continue operating a sustainable farming operation. Yeah, so what else can I talk about today for this week? I'm sure the numbers are just popping in terms of views on my Monday morning podcasts, maybe getting close to Bill Burr's numbers. For those of you who are first listening to this, I'm basically ripping off Bill Burr's idea of having a Monday morning podcast where I just rant about stuff. Yeah, so this week I've got an interesting call with a company out of the UK who have a carbon calculation tool which helps farmers apparently really understand how much carbon they're sequestering, maybe can sequester in their soil, which has been a very tough nut to crack. So I'm hopeful that we can do something here in Ontario. Um, in the process of finalizing the launch for Area 81 in terms of what our roadmap will look like for the next 6 to 12 months. So Area 81, it stands for a Rural Entrepreneurship Accelerator. Um, and the 81 is basically, I love the number 8. It has significance to me. And I wanted to sort of play around the idea of Area 51 in terms of the curiousness or the curiosity associated to what exists at Area 51, what can exist, what should exist, what's being, what's behind those curtains, so to speak. So that was the idea. We'll probably play around with it more in terms of what that means, but basically that's it. And the vision of Area 81 is basically to accelerate the development of entrepreneurs in rural markets, starting with Grey Bruce, but also to accelerate the commercialization of select ventures, innovation-driven ventures. So I think I'll end up with just an example of what a typical Area 81 member might look like using Bob the Barber. So Bob comes and wants to join Area 81, and we have two options. We have the peer-to-peer network, and we have the early stage venture program, or early venture stage program. I can't remember, but it's basically any if an entrepreneur wants to join the network to interact with other entrepreneurs of varying degrees of experience, they can join, and they can participate in special events and activities, workshops, that sort of thing, in Grey Bruce. And the cost is $500 to join. Now, if you're an entrepreneur outside of Grey Bruce and you want to perhaps establish a presence in Grey Bruce, you can also join. So we do have entrepreneurs that have joined Area 81 who don't live and work in Grey Bruce, but see Grey Bruce as a potential target market for market development. Perhaps they're thinking about moving up here, perhaps they have a cottage up here, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the peer-to-peer network. That's $500 to join for the year. But then there's the early stage venture program, which is $500 a month. So getting back to my example of Bob the Barber. So we have Bob, he comes in and he says, hey, I want to start up my own barbershop in Port Elgin. I would like to join the peer-to-peer network. And they can, anybody who is an entrepreneur can join the peer-to-peer network and benefit from the value it provides. Then he says, well, I'd really like you to help me accelerate the success of my barbershop, and I would like to spend more money and spend $500 a month, to be part of your early stage ventures program. And in that case, we would say that it's not the ideal program for them, because if he doesn't really want to expand beyond Port Elgin, he just wants to have a barbershop, then he'll get all the value he needs out of the peer-to-peer. And where we want to focus on in terms of the early stage venture program is we want to focus on disruptive ideas, innovation-driven venture ideas that are going to transcend across Canada in multiple markets and maybe be international in scope. So he says, "Oh, okay, I get it. You get it." So but before he leaves, he says to me, "Oh, by the way, I've got a thing I invented. It's like a capsule, and you put that capsule in a bottle of Coke, and when you drink it, hair grows on your head." Now that is an innovation-oriented, internationally desirable product that we would definitely run through the early stage venture program. from there you can think about just how that would potentially become, an international product, and it would involve a business model focused in on potentially raising capital, that sort of thing. So yes, we would help Bob the Barber with his, with his single barbershop in Port Elgin, for sure, through the peer-to-peer network. But if he needed a team and he wanted to, launch this this hair growth solution, that's a good example of something that we'd put through the early stage venture program. Anyway, so really excited about where we're going with Area 81. I'm confident that Canada will prevail given the shit storm that we and other countries are experiencing because of the current U.S. administration. I would say, finally, to those I know in the U.S. Who I have relationships with, I want to continue working with you. I know that perhaps there's a extremely small group of people, maybe just those working in the administration, who, for whatever reason, think that the current strategy of tariffs, and alienating long-term allies and partners, is something that is hopefully not nefariously being done so that Donald and his team stay in power forever, engineer chaos. I think we'll get through it. It sure is a test on democracy, that's for sure. It will be a test on, in my view, decisions that will be made by leaders in the government, whether it be the U.S. government or our government or other governments. So we need our A-team on this. And then we need an A-team in the U.S. that can countervail some of the stupid things that Trump and the administration is doing. And we really need to uncover the true motivation behind what Trump is doing. I have some feelings about it. I think he doesn't want to ever not be the president. And when he passes on, he will want somebody else to take it over. I think he wants to create a dictatorship. I think the people around him want to be part of that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people in the administration are buying stocks short right now. I wouldn't put it past Trump or his family. I wouldn't put it past some of the oligarchs that are involved in this. So the concentration of power in terms of the entrepreneurs, especially the tech entrepreneurs, who seem to have a stranglehold on a lot of things these days. I mean, we look at Zuckerberg and the way that Facebook is so influential on people. We look at Musk in terms of his total dependency on government funding for all of his businesses, and I've done a tweet on this. We have oligarchs in the U.S. just like there are oligarchs in Russia, and there are oligarch companies in Canada that restrict free trade. We have to get through this, and to be honest, what drives our economy, whether it's the Canadian economy, the U.S. economy, and I'm guessing many other democratic economies, is small businesses and entrepreneurs. It's less, how do I say it? It's not less. The amount of influence that small businesses and entrepreneurs is not directly proportional to the impact they have on the economy, on local communities, on people in general. It's bass backwards. A small group of entrepreneurs who are exceedingly rich, disgustingly rich, let's say, have too much power. I think they've been too lucky in some cases. Like I would put 10 small business owners just here in Grey Bruce up against Musk, Zuckerberg, Bezos, any day, in terms of them being smarter, them being more ethical, them being them caring about their communities, about their country, about their employees, about their customers. I would put them up against, I could pick 5 entrepreneurs right now in Grey Bruce who are smarter, better people. And if you had planted them in Silicon Valley and they pitched against Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg, it would be no contest. They're lucky, and in some cases they came from privilege. They went to the right schools because the parents could afford to send them. And that's the problem. In fact, I'll talk about this later at some point in time. But the good news is, I guess I'm encouraged, I always will be encouraged, that good will prevail over bad. Things will work out. Leaders will emerge who are going to set the ship right. But we all have to actively be involved in our politics, in our communities, more today than ever before. We have to get out of our COVID cycle of staying home, of hunkering down. We can't spend as much time and effort on screens, whether it's streaming movies, videos, streaming games, that sort of thing. But if we do look at a screen, spend more time learning about what's going on in our country, and then gaming. Anyways, I'm going on and on and on, and probably anybody that's listened hasn't got this far in this podcast, but hopefully this has been a good use of your time listening to this week's podcast. I guess I'll leave with this. The most important thing that matters right now is our families and our kids, and what the future can be for them. And I will never look too further beyond that than their future. So I hope you have a great week, and we'll touch base next week.